Because we remind you often, consumption makes up more than half of our total economy. Therefore, our confidence to consume is vital for our economic health. Well, today's key consumer confidence measure by Westpac and the Melbourne Institute shows ongoing weakness. But it's when you drill down into the numbers, there are plenty of surprises about who feels best and who doesn't. Matthew Hassan is a senior economist with Westpac and joins me now. Matthew, always great to chat to you. Let's start with the overall health and confidence of our economy and also of these consumers.
Look, it's still pessimism is the dominant theme. And really, it's the cost of living crisis that's still dominating consumers.
So you think there's a cost of living crisis? That's what this shows you?
Absolutely. That's what the sentiment measures are telling us. It's concerns around family finances, time to buy a major household item. It's lifting a little bit. I think the news around inflation has been less acute crisis over the last few months, and that showed through in questions around news.
So just a quick one. As we look at this chart there, as we're just looking at that, those numbers, 100 is basically neutral.
That's right. Yeah.
So this is 84.4.
Yeah.
And that shows that pretty much people are pessimistic.
That's right. Pessimists dominate optimists by a huge margin at the moment. You know, this has been true now for 15 to 18 months, basically since the middle of 2022. And it's one of the longest periods we've seen of pessimism.
So when people are pessimistic, what do they do? How do they behave?
Well, they curtail their spending. So it depends on the nature of the pessimism. So back in the early 90s recession, the pessimism was all wrapped up with jobs. And so there were acute budget pressures for a lot of people who faced job loss and had to cut back severely. This time around, it's about inflation. So it's about trimming budgets where they need to accommodate higher prices, plus higher interest rates and higher tax takes, the triple whammy that's weighing on consumers at the moment. So it's less acute than we saw in the early 1990s, but it's pretty pervasive. Everyone's feeling this cost of living crisis one way or another.
Okay, so when you drill down the numbers, as I say, that's where it starts to get really interesting. And we're going to show people a series of charts here to give them a little sense as to what it looks like. So the very first one we're going to put up is based around gender, right?
Yeah.
So this is gender. So I've gone back only 1 year here. You can go back further if you like. Men here are overwhelmingly more confident than women, even though they're both unconfident. Look at the women there.
Yeah.
They're less confident than the general community.
Oh, and sub 80 is dismal sentiment. So
dismal sentiment.
But what we've seen with this gender split is that there is a divide of 8 to 10 points consistently since the mid-70s. So what we're seeing now is a little bit wider than usual. I'll grant you that.
Yes.
But it's a fascinating aspect of the survey. Because
and remembering here, 100 is neutral. So that's what we're going to explain to people. 100 is neutral. Right. Yep. 91 is kind of like, well, I'm really not that happy. 77 is, I'm really deeply unhappy.
Okay, I'm going to throw some other things at you with the split around gender. It happens despite income levels and age. So it's common across every band. If you're a woman, you're less optimistic or more pessimistic than men typically. It seems to be more cyclical with men.
Right.
And you can spin it both ways. Like it could be that there's persistent pessimism with women for various reasons.
Okay, I want to take you to the next one. This is based on age. So if we have a look at this, the most confident people that we have in Australia are aged between 18 and 24 right now. And if you go then to the over 45s, have a look at them. They're less confident than women as a group.
That's right. I think that last one is pretty interesting. So the first one, 18 to 24-year-olds, it's primarily about jobs. Cost of fuel is a big one for that subgroup as well. Less and less about rents because they're tending to stay in the family home for longer.
Yes.
And so when we look at youth unemployment, up until quite recently, it's been very low by historical standards. So I think that's partly about the jobs market.
And what about the over 45s?
Well, over 45s, I think that's a really interesting one because I think in there you've got a mixture of lower debt exposure, so less sensitivity to interest rates, but I think there's more exposure to cost of living around basics for some retired subgroups. Plus, I think there's perhaps more memory of the last time we had high inflation and the problems that came along.
Okay, I want to go to home ownership now because we want to do this pretty quickly and whip through them. Home ownership shows, again, if you're a tenant, you're pretty pessimistic. If you're a homeowner and you have no mortgage, you're pretty much a little happy, but you're not overly happy. But I want to take you to the final one because I love this. Voting intentions. This is the best of all. If we take you to the next one, voting intentions. People who are intending to vote for the ALP are really confident.
Yeah.
They're above 100.
Yeah.
The coalition voter's not so happy, but have a look at the Greens. They're morose as well.
Yeah. It's all over the shop, really, isn't it?
So what does that say anything
Well,
about?
look, I think the voting intention, the top line one, I think, is a reflection of the stage 3 tax cuts. And
Yes.
They got rejigged and how that's played out in the core constituency for ALP. The news around climate change has been pretty persistently dismal, so I'm not surprised Greens are very pessimistic. But yeah, it shows that there's a real variety of views out there, and this political alignment is actually quite important to how people are framing their assessment of things.
I tell you what, Matt Hassan, it's always great to get you in. There's always interesting stuff to talk about, and I appreciate your time today.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.